Across the marching columns of medieval Persian armies, survival often depended not on the sharpness of a blade, but on a single strip of dried meat. Under a sun that scorched at 40 tasses by day and froze the dunes by night, soldiers carried no salt cellars, no cool storage, only the ancient wisdom of wind, smoke, and desert heat. From the Sassanid frontiers to Safavid campaigns, they crafted meat that could endure months of hardship. Each slice was more than food. It was life, compacted and carried through the sands. For medieval Persian armies, warfare was rarely confined to a single battlefield. Campaigns could stretch across thousands of miles, from the rugged Zagros mountains to the burning plains of Mesopotamia. Soldiers marched for weeks without seeing a single settlement large enough to supply fresh food. In such conditions, perishables were an impossible luxury. Heat exceeding 40 degrees during the day destroyed anything soft, while freezing winds at night made even simple cooking difficult. Instead, mobility became the soul of strategy. Armies survived by becoming self-sufficient, carrying what they needed on their backs, camels and mules. This meant that every item had to earn its weight, especially food. Meat was essential for strength but hopelessly fragile in its fresh state. It spoiled quickly, attracted insects, and rotted faster in desert climates. Thus, Persian commanders understood that the secret to endurance lay not in the sword, but in preservation. Dried meat emerged as the ultimate solution. Lightweight, durable, concentrated in nutrients, and able to withstand extreme environments. Across Sassanid frontier patrols or Safavid long-range expeditions, soldiers relied on these preserved slices to sustain both body and morale. In the harsh silence of the desert, a ration of dried meat was not merely sustenance but reassurance, a reminder that survival had been planned long before the march began. Choosing the right meat was the first step in ensuring long-lasting provisions. Medieval Persians favoured animals adapted to the region's climate: sheep, goats, and camels. These meats were naturally lean and muscular, containing less fat than cattle. Fat was the enemy of preservation. It turned rancid under scorching desert sun and could ruin an entire supply. Soldiers and cooks sliced the meat into long, thin strips, removing sinew and trimming away every trace of soft tissue. The goal was a clean, dense surface that dried quickly and evenly. Before drying, the meat might be lightly salted in coastal regions, but deep inland, where salt was precious, sun and wind alone were trusted. The strips were laid out on reed mats or hung from coarse linen ropes stretched between tent poles. Exposed to steady desert winds, the meat began to firm and shrink. Only the toughest cuts, those that could endure both handling and travel, were used. These cuts, once dried, became almost wooden in texture, but they held their shape through long marches and sudden sandstorms. By selecting the right meat and preparing it with precision, Persian soldiers ensured that their provisions could outlast the journey. Every slice carried the deliberate wisdom of people who understood the desert as both an adversary and a partner in survival. Iran's high plateau gave medieval Persian soldiers a natural ally, an intense, arid climate perfect for preservation. Once the meat was sliced and cleaned, it was exposed to the sun and the dry desert wind, creating a rapid dehydration process that few other regions could achieve. Soldiers or camp cooks stretched the strips across wooden frames, reed racks, or taut linen cords. These setups kept the meat elevated, away from sand and blowing dust, while allowing maximum airflow. Within hours, the thin strips began to lose moisture. The dry wind acted like a constant fan, pulling water out of the fibres, while the heat from the sun created a hostile environment for bacteria. By the second or third day, the pieces had transformed completely, rigid, lighter, nearly hollow-sounding when tapped together. This was not meant to be tender food. It was meant to endure. The resulting dried meat could last for months without spoiling, even when packed tightly into a soldier's satchel. Dust storms, sudden rain, and temperature swings no longer threatened the precious provisions. This method turned nature into a preservation tool, allowing armies to move across vast, unforgiving landscapes where fresh supplies were impossible to find. In many campaigns, the sun and wind became silent quartermasters, feeding soldiers without ever lifting a hand. While sun-drying was common, many regions of Persia enhanced the process with smoke. In Fars, Khorasan, and mountainous villages, cooks burned walnut wood, grapevine branches, or wild shrubs to produce dense aromatic smoke. The meat, already partially dried, was hung inside small huts or covered pits, where the smoke curled around each strip. Smoke served multiple purposes. It repelled insects, slowed bacterial growth, and created a thin protective layer on the meat's surface. This coating acted like a natural seal, keeping moisture out and extending shelf life even further. The smoky flavour also masked any harshness left from the drying process, making the meat easier to eat during long marches. For many soldiers, this smoked version, sometimes called gushi doom, meaning the meat shaped by smoke and wind, was preferred for its durability and taste. The aroma reminded them of home, of hearth fires in distant villages, even when they were crossing barren deserts or icy passes. By combining sun-drying with smoking, Persian armies gained a powerful advantage. Their food supplies became more reliable than those of many neighbouring forces, enabling them to travel farther without fear of hunger. Smoke in its simplicity became another weapon, soft, fragrant, and vital for survival. When campaigns stretched into months, Persian soldiers relied on additional preservation techniques to extend the life of their dried meat. One such method involves submerging the strips in rendered sheep fat. Once the fat cooled and solidified, it created an airtight seal around each piece. Without access to oxygen, bacteria struggled to grow, allowing the meat to remain safe for astonishingly long periods. In other regions, especially those with strong dairy traditions, soldiers soaked dried meat in strained yogurt, known as kashk. Its mild acidity tightened the fibres, reduced surface bacteria, and added a subtle tang that made the meat more palatable. Once dried again, this yogurt-coated meat became extremely durable, surviving even the most punishing desert marches. The use of cool ash from the campfire was another surprising technique. A light dusting of fine ash acted as a natural desiccant, absorbing leftover moisture and discouraging insects. Though simple, this method was widely respected among rural communities and nomadic warriors. These practices reflect a deep, intuitive understanding of food chemistry, long before modern science explained it. With nothing more than fire, milk, and earth, medieval Persians created a suite of preservation methods that allowed soldiers to carry security in their packs, proof of human ingenuity shaped by necessity and the unforgiving desert. During especially long expeditions, soldiers needed food that was not only preserved but compact and easy to ration. This led to the creation of gushi sanak, a remarkable battlefield innovation. Dried meat was pounded with stones or mortars until it became coarse flakes. These flakes were mixed with barley flour and a small amount of water, forming a thick paste-like dough. The mixture was then pressed beneath heated stones, sangak, flattening it into dense wafer-like slabs. Once fully dried, these slabs could be stacked like tiles, extremely light yet nutritionally concentrated. A single piece could sustain a soldier for days, especially when paired with water or a bit of onion. This compressed ration was the medieval Persian equivalent of military field bars. It resisted humidity, insects, and heat, and it could be eaten as is or boiled into a simple stew. The combination of grain and meat provided balanced energy, allowing troops to march for long hours without stopping for elaborate meals. Gushi sangak represents the fusion of culinary creativity and military necessity. In a world where supply lines were uncertain, these stone-pressed rations became a silent partner in every campaign, fueling endurance, discipline, and survival across the empire's vast, shifting frontiers. Transporting dried meat across Persia's vast landscapes demanded both practicality and resilience. Soldiers packed their rations tightly into pouches made from sheep hide or coarse wool. These materials were naturally breathable, preventing moisture buildup while still shielding the contents from sand and dust. Each pouch was compactly filled, pressed flat to minimize bulk, and tied with leather cords to withstand constant movement. An average soldier carried between 2 to 3 kilograms of dried meat, divided into small portions for ease of access. The rations were often stored alongside barley bread, onions, or dried herbs, creating a simple but sustaining diet. When hunger struck, the meat could be eaten dry, tough and chewy but rich in strength, or rehydrated in water or broth over a campfire. The true value of these portable rations lay in their reliability. Soldiers navigating the scorching Lut Desert, the icy Armenian passes, or the unpredictable terrain around the Caspian Sea were never entirely dependent on local supplies. Their food was already secured, packed on their belts, saddles, or camel harnesses. This self-sufficiency allowed Persian armies to maintain speed, maneuver independently, and outlast opponents who relied on foraging. In the rhythm of marching boots and camel bells, the quiet weight of dried meat became an unseen backbone of every journey. Even in the harshest environments, evening meals in Persian military camps carried a sense of ritual and camaraderie. At dusk, soldiers gathered around small fires scattered across the camp perimeter. As pots of water boiled, strips of dried meat were added, gradually softening into a savoury stew often flavoured with onions, garlic, or wild herbs collected along the march. The smell of these humble meals drifted across the desert, mingling with smoke and cooling winds. Sharing food became a moment of unity, an unspoken promise that no one faced the hardships of war alone. It was common for soldiers to trade small pieces of their rations, a gesture of trust and mutual dependence. Safavid chronicles recount a soldier saying, "When the meat softens in the pot, we know we have survived another day." In a world filled with uncertainty, the simple act of cooking together reinforced morale and steadied the mind. These meals were brief but meaningful. They allowed soldiers to rest weary limbs, exchange stories, and renew determination before the next day's march. Whether in desert plains, forest edges, or fortified encampments, the evening stew was a quiet anchor in the chaos of war, a moment where survival tasted warm, familiar, and human. Dried meat was far more than a simple ration. It was a strategic asset that shaped the mobility and endurance of medieval Persian armies. By carrying durable food with them, soldiers reduced their dependence on unpredictable local supplies and avoided delays caused by foraging or waiting for supply caravans. This autonomy allowed commanders to execute long-range maneuvers across mountain ranges, deserts, and steppe regions without fear of starvation. Campaigns through Mesopotamia, the Caspian lowlands, or the Armenian highlands required logistical finesse. Fresh provisions were scarce, and local populations could not always support large armies. But with sacks of dried meat strapped to their saddles, Persian forces moved with remarkable speed, often outpacing their enemies' expectations. This mobility contributed to both offensive and defensive successes. Armies could pursue fleeing opponents, retreat swiftly when necessary, and maintain sieges for extended periods. Even psychological morale improved. Soldiers who knew their food was secure marched with greater confidence and discipline. In many ways, dried meat was an invisible weapon, one that did not shimmer like steel but sustained the strength that wielded it. The ability to preserve protein in a harsh climate helped Persian armies remain formidable across centuries, proving that logistics, not just bravery, determines the fate of war. Behind every strip of dried meat lies an intimate story of survival, ingenuity, and human adaptation. Medieval Persian soldiers transformed the unforgiving desert into an ally, using sun, wind, smoke, and earth to protect their food in ways both humble and ingenious. These rations were more than nutrition. They were symbols of resilience carried across vast frontiers. In the quiet hours before dawn marches, a soldier chewing a tough piece of dried meat tasted not just sustenance, but the reassurance of preparation. In campfires glowing under star-filled skies, shared stews offered warmth, companionship, and hope. Through these simple meals, soldiers preserved not only their bodies, but also their belief that endurance was possible even in the harshest circumstances. Today, the methods they used remind us of the timeless human ability to adapt, turning limited resources into lasting strength. In the shifting sands of Persia, amidst danger and uncertainty, dried meat became a lifeline that embodied courage, loyalty, and the determination to survive. And so, long after swords have rusted and empires have fallen, the story of how Persian soldiers preserved their food endures, a quiet testament to the creativity and heart of those who once marched beneath the desert sun.